and welcome to Tea and Strumpets, a Regency romance review. I'm Zoe.
And I'm Kelsey.
And Kelsey, we have been in quarantine for quite some time now. We both live in California in the U.S., so we're still under stay-at-home orders, I believe. The world is a very weird place right now. I feel very insulated in my own house because I do stay at home so much. But we're just starting to have some things lifted, I believe, in California for certain types of businesses and things like that. So some businesses are starting to be able to open and kind of go back to operational things now that we're getting there. But yeah, it's been like definitely over 2 months of this here in California. So I guess now is a great time for a check-in.
Yeah.
Kelsey, how are you doing?
I'm doing pretty good. My work situation is one of those that's actually been slowly allowed to reopen. And so I am now, instead of going in a few days a week, I'm going in at a regular schedule. And next week will probably begin my more full-time hours. Lately, I've been going in nice and early. I get done kind of mid-afternoon. It's a nice day.
Ooh, fancy.
But yeah, so we are opening up, which is good for a lot of reasons. But it's definitely, I'm going to be very busy next week. Very busy.
My goodness.
Well, it ramped up, and then I had a week of kind of quiet where there was a lull in between the initial crazy and then the implementation, and now the implementation is happening, so my week is going to explode again.
Gotcha. Yeah, I think my business is hopefully pretty far away from reopening. And I say hopefully because I work at a technology company and we are able to do our jobs 100% remotely. And so while I love our beautiful, fancy downtown office, I think that I don't know. I feel very strongly that it's our social responsibility to be part of the solution.
Absolutely.
And since, like I said, since we can do our jobs 100% remotely, I feel like we should be remote for a long time.
Yes.
I just don't feel we're anywhere close to understanding what's happening and where we're really at to jump into things right now.
I think that's the biggest thing with everything right now is we're in this weird state of unknown. And there's still so many unknowns out there.
Yep.
But frankly, we're all just doing the best we can. And if the best we can do is just wearing a mask outside and limiting interaction with people whenever possible, it won't kill us.
It won't.
And in fact, may save the life of another.
It may. And it's, we understand as we're saying this, there's so much more complexity than that. And I think both of us agree, I miss people. I miss my family. I miss my friends. I miss real life. I'm definitely getting stir crazy, even though I'm in a privileged position. And I feel also really bad for my dog, who doesn't understand why she hasn't gotten to socialize with any other dogs for 2 months. And now every time we go on a walk, she just whines. Aww. And I feel like I'm being a terrible human being. She whines at other dogs in a way that she's never done it before. And I feel like I'm being a terrible human being for not letting her socialize. But I know that that's part of my responsibility is to just really distance from other people. And so we don't allow petting and we don't have her play with the neighbor dogs because the kids touch all the neighbor dogs, etc. So I'm feeling bad about that. But, you kind of mentioned that this is a time of uncertainty, and it is. It's for sure a time of uncertainty. But in a time of uncertainty, what's better than something a little bit certain, like a guaranteed happily ever after?
I mean, nothing's better than a guaranteed happily ever after anytime.
I know. So, I am super thankful for romance right now because it has been giving me a lot of comfort during this time. And so we're here to talk about romance today. And shall we do that?
We shall. Today we're going to be talking about A Beginner's Guide to Rakes by Suzanne Enoch.
And I think we might have called her Susan Enoch before, so really sorry about that. It's definitely Suzanne, so whoops.
We can't read sometimes. I know that's what we do all the time, but sometimes the reading to mouth, it just doesn't work.
Yeah. So whoops, apologies if we did that. So we do have some author facts this week, as this is our first Suzanne Enoch book that we are reading. And I was looking on her website, and she's got like lists of her favorite things, like TV shows, movies, and books. And like Suzanne and I are like simpatico. Like her favorite TV shows were like Castle and Leverage and like all of the like 44 minuters that are like fun. And anyhow, I was just like, yes, Suzanne, you and me both. So I really enjoyed that.
Excellent. Well, I'm going to tell you a little bit more about her personal history. Suzanne was born in Southern California sometime in the latter half of the 20th century. In the way that some people are born knowing they want to be astronauts or cellists, Suzanne always knew she wanted to be a writer. Early dreams of becoming a zoologist and writing true stories about her adventures in Africa were crushed, however, after she viewed a television special about the world's most poisonous snakes. She did not want to write about how she'd been bitten and lost a limb to a cobra. Girl, feel you. Thankfully, at the same time the movie Star Wars premiered, and she realized she could make up adventures and write about them, and not be eaten by deadly predators while doing research. She dabbled in romantic fantasy writing for a year or two after graduating with a degree in English from UC Irvine, until her affection for traditional Regency romances led her to write one for fun. After several encouraging rejections from publishers, she snared the interest of the world's best and most patient literary agent, who advised her to revise the manuscript. This ultimately led to the publication of her first book, The Black Duke's Prize, from Avon Books in the spring of 1995. When Avon folded its traditional Regency line, Suzanne was encouraged to try her hand at historical romance. As she remained keenly interested in England's Regency period, she decided to attempt another manuscript set in that time. Lady Rogue hit the shelves in March of 1997. She wrote a total of 29 books for Avon, including 2 anthologies and a 5-part contemporary series, which received a pair of starred reviews from Publishers Weekly. In 2002, her well-known love of all things Star Wars led to an invitation to appear on the E! Channel television special Star Wars: The Force is Back, where she discussed the romance in the movie series and ended up with more airtime than George Lucas.
You go, girl.
Get it? Suzanne is known for her humorous characters, sexy bad boys, and whip-sharp, witty dialogue. She currently resides in Placentia, California, with several hundred guppies and various other tropical fish, and a handful of very loud, spinach-loving finches, and her collection of action figures and statues from Star Wars, Lord of the Rings, X-Men, and Pirates of the Caribbean. Everybody needs some inspiration, after all.
Aw, I really thought her bio had so much flavor.
I know, it has tons going on there.
And I like cut it down to try to make it a little, a little bit more succinct for our podcast here. But there was so much good stuff in there, I couldn't get rid of a lot of it. I love that about like having more airtime than George Lucas and all of that stuff. It's so cool.
That's great.
So anyhow.
No. Fun.
Now on to our book. So our main trope today, I feel like there's one. There's really one trope in this book, which is kind of rare. We usually have a lot, but I mean, I would say it's enemies to lovers.
Yep, that's pretty much what it is.
Yeah. So our main characters are Oliver Warren, the Marquess of Haybury, and Diane Benchley, the Countess of Cameron. So shall we get started?
We shall. Our book opens to our hero taken aback at a simple statement. It seems that a lady from his past, Diane Benchley, has been seen returning to London after 2 years abroad. He tries to play it cool as he asks for more information, for no one knew that they had ever been involved. But he is immensely curious. However, no one is quite sure anything more than the fact that she's returned. Diane, on the other hand, has finally returned to London after 2 years of very careful planning, after her husband's untimely, or perhaps timely, death in Vienna. She'd spent 2 years clawing her way out of his enormous debts, vowing to find a way to never be at the mercy of another man ever again.
She has moved back to Adam House, which her husband thankfully left her in his will as it was not entailed. However, it is grander than Cameron House in London, and the Camerons are extremely unhappy to lose Adam House. In fact, on her first day back, her brother-in-law, the new Lord Cameron, comes calling to try to strong-arm her into giving them back Adam House. But of course, that isn't going to happen. Truly, they should be thankful that she paid all of her late husband's debts for them, so the earldom isn't in the black anymore. Plus, they have all the entailed properties. She is owed Adam's house, so she turns him away easily. Her spine is quite straight and unbending now.
After some time sitting in the quiet Adam house to let the tons speculate, Diane makes her first appearance at a ball and starts dropping hints about her plan. A plan which has had to drastically change in the past few days, as her original benefactor has had the indecency to drop dead at the most inopportune moment. However, she knows that there's another person who, while a lot more dangerous to tangle with, might just make a better investor and pawn in her scheme after all. Plus, she has some blackmail to hold over this adversary, so, she's in a good spot.
So while mingling at the ball, she lets drop that she plans to open a gaming club to a few choice ears, and then she squares her shoulders for the next part of her plan, hooking the attention of the Marquess of Haybury. But, knowing their history, she has to be a bit devious, so she tells him, quote, "Do call on me tomorrow at 10 o'clock. We shall have tea in front of a crowd." But Oliver is an admirable foe and grabs her arm roughly, crowd be damned, quote, "The murmuring became gasps of surprise. Whatever you're attempting to tangle me in, I will destroy you for this," he'd breathed. She smiled again. "You may try," she returned. "Now unhand me or I shall kiss you."
So Diane leaves the ball later with her main objectives achieved, thinking, quote, "This was her venture, and no one else would be allowed to guide, assume, or abscond with it, ever. The sooner one particularly arrogant man learned his place in the scheme of things, the better for everyone concerned. She would tell him that tomorrow, at 10 o'clock.
Oliver joins Diane the next day, a bit after 10, warily. Oliver comments that she was wearing black when they first met, as she still is now. We learn that they had met in Vienna less than a month after her husband's death, and he pokes at her, saying that she certainly didn't mean the black then, and can't possibly mean it now. Quote, Oliver lifted an eyebrow. "How closely do you wish me to recall the events of Vienna? Because I wouldn't have called it mourning." "You didn't care what I called it. How would the color of my gown signify when you only wanted me out of it?"
We also learned that after the affair, Oliver ran back to London to Diane's eyes like a scalded dog. He insists it was to claim his inheritance, but the animosity between the two is clear. So eventually we get to the crux of the meeting. Diane has a bit of blackmail in Oliver. She has a signed affidavit that he cheated at one game of cards in Vienna. And as Oliver is a heavy and fortunate gambler, this knowledge could get him evicted from every club in London and afar forever. So he listens to her terms. Diane needs £5,000 investment to start her new club. As a woman, she can't get the money from a bank, so she needs a personal loan, which she will repay with appropriate interest. She will not, however, take any advice or, in fact, any input at all from Oliver. Oh, and he shall live in one of the private apartments to lend credibility to the club as well.
She also admits that she has a talent for forgery and had forged her late husband's will, signing over all the unentailed properties to her. Then she had sold all but Adam's house to pay off the debts. And now, since her old benefactor and his promised property were off the table, Diane plans to turn Adam House into her club with a few tricky renovations. She is inspired to start a club because her husband's wagering had taken everything from her, and she's learned one important lesson from that. The house always wins, so she shall become the house. Plus, she shall employ pretty, educated women, which she believes the men will enjoy. She won't be running a brothel, but she won't stop the women from doing whatever they want to do.
Suffice it to say that Oliver does not like this plan, but Diane has won this round. Also, at some point, she pulled out a pistol from her desk and pointed it at him for a while during the conversation. What prompted the need for a pistol during deliberations is admittedly not clear. Tensions didn't seem that high. So Oliver decides to acquiesce and strategize for the next battle.
As funds have been secured and renovations commence, word about her club is spreading around town. Most think Diane insane to try, but admit to a curiosity about her curious ideas and the air of mystery surrounding the whole affair. It seems all the men can't wait to take a peek, and then they can't wait to see her fall. Her Cameron relatives are also quite upset at the renovations of Adam House and her scheme. However, Diane firmly tells her brother-in-law that he has no hold on her and boots him out of her house on his next visit again. Diane also sets about hiring her educated ladies. She is quite surprised at the number of applicants and happy when there are quite a few suitable ladies through the first round of interviews. Soon she realizes that some of these ladies are hiding their real names and some even come from noble backgrounds, but she doesn't really care as long as they can do their job and do it well.
Attempting to get the upper hand in the next round, Oliver arrives at Adam's house unannounced. They spar a bit and then determine that Oliver can interview and train the ladies how to be dealers and aid in their selection process. Of course, he has a few demands of his own. Since part of the plan is for them to appear to be lovers, Diane must accompany him to a ball. Taken off guard by his quick maneuvering, Diane agrees. However, Diane wins the ball round. After an argument during a waltz, Oliver stops in the middle of the dance floor, surprising everyone around them. However, Diane just takes it in stride, kisses her palm, places it over his mouth, telling him, "You do say the most interesting things," and walking away from him.
Their next meeting is for interviewing prospective dealers at Adam House. They get into a couple arguments throughout their discussion on which girls are suitable for the task and which games they should have at the club. But one thing is clear. They are both quite hurt from their time together and whatever transpired in Vienna. They call each other names and append adjectives to each other like Satan, evil, vile chit, and are constantly calling each other liar. There is no trust between them, and Oliver keeps trying to intimidate Diane by getting closer to her, but she never, ever, ever backs away, nor even leans a tiny bit into his advances. When he tries flirting to throw her off guard, her guard instead raises.
After the interviews are over, they manage to have a civil conversation over a game of cards discussing the applicants. And then, quite literally all of a sudden, Oliver jumps across the table and kisses Diane roughly. Quote, "Before she could shift backward, he grabbed the front of her black muslin gown and yanked her forward. Lifting her chin with his free hand, he lowered his mouth over hers. He'd slammed on his spine at the contact. He wasn't gentle about it either, pulling her halfway across the table as he plundered her mouth."
Oliver, of course, had meant to kiss her to prove to himself that Vienna was a fantasy, but to him, the kiss had only solidified the passion that they had had. However, it is extremely important to note that we get none of Diane's inner thoughts here, but we do get her actions. For as he turns to leave, with what he and the author thought was a witty exit line, she shoots him.
They bandage his flesh wound, and he tells her they're even. He damaged her pride in Vienna, and now she has shot him. She replies, "If you attempt to kiss me again without my consent, I will aim my pistol much lower."
However, here on page 73 of the book, we get the first tiny glimmer of anything warmer than hatred from Diane towards Oliver when she confesses that shooting him, quote, disturbed her more than she'd anticipated. I put that in there because that was literally the first glimmer of, as I said, anything more than hatred. So, as renovations die down and the furniture and decorations begin arriving in earnest, Oliver gets his first tour of the Tantalus Club. He realizes a couple of things. First, Diane needs more advice than she's willing to receive, so he basically growls that she will listen to him for a bit, and she argues quite a bit, but eventually does and realizes he's giving her quite good advice. Secondly, he realizes that it's actually quite scantily furnished, and in fact, Diane needs more money for this place to be a success. So he offers her a deal. He'll give her 5,000 more pounds, but he doesn't really want money in return. What does he want? Quote, "You." Her jaw dropped before she could stop it. 1,000 thoughts spun through her mind. At least half of them involved her with a weapon and him lying dead. The other half, though. "But I hate you," she exclaimed. "What does that have to do with anything?" he asked. "You are a despicable man. Go away before I have you removed." He rose as well, moving around the table toward her. "You could do that. Or attempt it anyway. But consider my offer. Another 5,000 pounds with the same terms as previously. And 1 night, no, 24 hours, with no one but me, at a time and place of my choosing."
Diane knows the money will help her venture, wondering, quote, if she agreed, Would he claim victory? He could certainly attempt to do so, but if she viewed it merely as a business transaction, then what had she to lose? She'd survived him before, after all, and this time, at least, she knew the rules. After much deliberating, she decides to agree. When they meet again, she shakes on it, saying, quote, "I'm not yours, Oliver, nor will I ever be again. As I said, this is business. Call it whatever you like, darling. We'll see how clinical you can be when I'm moving inside you."
Okay. Sorry. It feels like I should comment after that, but we're going to continue moving on and we will comment lots during the general discussion. Mm-hmm. But Oliver isn't done bargaining for Diane's affections. The next time she wants something from him, he barters for a kiss from her. She threatens him with the blackmail letter, but eventually he out-argues her. She presses a fast kiss that he comments isn't much of a kiss, and she replies he isn't much of an inspiration as she leaves. But somehow Oliver sees this as a victory, and we continue.
The opening night of the club arrives and is a rousing success. Perhaps spurred by the energy of the successful opening night, perhaps spurred by seeing Diane dolled up and flirtatious, Oliver decides to claim his 24 hours then, starting at 4 a.m. when the club closes. And so their first night begins. Oliver has told himself that he's going to woo her slowly, starting with a bath. And he does start with a bath that she takes warily, trying to decide if she should drink or not, as, quote, "If she could become inebriated enough, perhaps she wouldn't even remember the next 24 hours. But that would make her a coward, and he would know it."
She doesn't really trust him even as he starts to wash her hair, flailing, thinking that he is going to push her head beneath the water. But he isn't, and he tenderly washes her hair, and eventually she begins to relax. Although Oliver planned not to make love to Diane until after a good night's sleep, seeing her wet after she emerges from the bath, he just can't stop his passion, and they have encounter number 1. Diane is a willing partner for sex, but it is important again to note that not once has she verbally expressed interest in Oliver, in fact calling him Satan only about 20 pages ago. And after the following passage occurs literally just before they get in bed together, quote, "You may as well enjoy yourself, Diane," he continued in the same tone, "because while you may claim to detest me, you also want me." It took a moment for her breath to return. "Don't be so certain of that." "I am." "Well, Oliver, I, for one, am not." However,
Oliver doesn't give her a chance to respond. And they get to the aforementioned encounter, begging her to say she wants him. And Diane flat out refuses. However, when she orgasms, he seems to think her arousal meant consent, saying, "I knew you wanted me," while Diane tries to pretend she isn't enjoying the orgasm. So afterwards, they sleep, and in the morning, over breakfast, we learn a little more of their affair in Vienna. Here are the details. It lasted a fortnight. It started less than a month after her husband died. Oliver left without much fanfare when his uncle died, and they haven't spoken since then.
Ah, dear listener, I'm sorry. Are you surprised at the lack of some sort of crazy trauma like I was? That Diane's animosity and absolute hatred of this man stems from a 2-week affair, and that there's not some secret baby or traumatic miscarriage or anything else underlying? And that he somehow formed the opinion after 2 short weeks in bed with a woman who he had 2 strong feelings for that she was absolutely devious and not to be trusted? Nothing else happened except they slept together and he left? Well, apologies for that is the story.
So we continue as Oliver takes Diane on a date. He's nice and normal, and Diane starts to realize she's having a decently enjoyable time out with Oliver. Funny, as they've never really spent much time together except for those 2 weeks in bed in Vienna. What a surprise that he's a human being! So he takes her to go ballooning, something neither of them has done before, and something really neither of them should do, as the balloonist tells him that they are simply setting up today and open tomorrow. Quote, "Today is only for show, and to make certain we have patched up all the lettres? The holes," Diane squeaked, translating, "Yes, holes."
But no holes will stop Oliver, and the captive Diane, due to their bargain, has to go up in the balloon. Luckily, no accident occurs, and they again have an enjoyable time.
After the balloon ride, Oliver can't resist a wager. He bargains for an evening at the theater with her if he can get her into White's for lunch. And he ends up winning. Then later that day, he bargains for another night with her if he releases her from her bargain this evening and she can see to the club. Diane relents. However, perhaps Oliver is growing because while he wants her, quote, he found the idea of experiencing that aspect of their encounter again distasteful. He wanted her to want him, which was odd considering that if she'd been anyone else, he would have thought the night's encounter absolutely ideal. Physical pleasure with no emotional entanglement. Apparently, at some moment in the past handful of hours, he'd gone mad.
Or perhaps he isn't really growing after all. Regardless, our story continues. Diane begins to be a bit more receptive to Oliver. They have a fine time at the theater. The Tantalus Club continues to be a success despite all its eccentricities. And Diane accepts more of Oliver's help with some decisions about club business. Of course, 25 or so pages later, she's once again not letting Oliver get a word in edgewise when he genuinely tries to be helpful, because we aren't that trusting yet.
And then we get to the twist in the plot and the big hurdle that they'll need to band together and learn to trust each other to overcome. It turns out that her brother-in-law has decided he wants to get the courts involved and have the will thrown out and take over the Tantalus Club because he's a greedy son of a bitch who sees the hard work she's put in and he's like, that looks like profit, that should be mine.
Yes. And so with an overly complicated plan with, to be honest, a great deal too many gaping plot holes in it, they do swindle Lord Cameron out of a lot of money and make him think that he's somehow gotten involved with a treason plot. And so if he ever tells anyone of his involvement in it, he'll be hanged or deported. And so he eventually runs squealing from the house, never to be heard from again.
In between these 100 pages of elaborated scheming and moving things forward ever so slowly, Oliver and Diane learn to trust and perhaps even like each other. And he admits he wants her willingly in his bed and lets her leave his quarters one evening without touching her. But then, feeling that he needs to show her the level of his desire, he chops a hole in the ceiling of her bedroom later that evening and drops in, trying to convince her that he's really changed. She replies, quote, "Yes, convinced. Not frightened half to death by men falling through my ceiling."
But somehow this plot works, and they have encounter number 2, and somehow emerge from it in a much better relationship than before. And later, as they're still trying to foil Lord Cameron, they talk more about Vienna, and Oliver admits he was scared by his intense feelings for Diane, which is why he ran. He was scared, but he insists he isn't running now. In fact, he's realized he wants to marry her, but knows that she isn't ready to hear that yet.
Oliver, Diane, boy. A few weeks later, they have encounter number 3, which is a quick on-the-desk office encounter, which seems enjoyable for both of them. And we'd think that after 75 more pages of growing closer, these 2 weeks of hurt might have been erased. But alas, Diane isn't there yet. For when Oliver professes his love for her, she responds by slapping him because he broke her heart after their 2-week affair 2 years ago. But he is not deterred, saying, "We are 2 bull-headed, wicked people who have lived very unconventional lives. Personally, I think we belong together."
And he asks her to marry him after this whole ordeal, though he requests she mull it over a while and withhold her answer until her club is safe from Lord Cameron. And when Lord Cameron runs scared, Diane finally does reply, saying, quote, "In the past 2 months, you've annoyed me, aggravated me, challenged me, argued with me, and you've put my heart back together again. I tried to tell myself that I had what I wanted, I had my independence, and that I didn't need anything else. I've discovered I like sharing things with you. I like chatting with you. I like sharing my life with you. I don't want someone to tell me what to do or what not to do. I am willing, however, to take on a partner, an equal."
So they are agreed to be married, and she says she loves him. And now, I think we have a lot to discuss, Zoe.
Yeah, so shall we adjourn to the parlor?
Yes, we shall.
All All right, folks, we have a very quick parlor here. We are looking for some book recommendations, of course. So if you have a book recommendation, we would love to hear from you. If you have an inclusive author you love, we want to hear about it and share it here in the parlor. Or if you've got a book you want to recommend for an episode, of course, we want to know that too. You can let us know through our email, which is romancepod@gmail.com. And we really do love hearing from you guys, so please don't hesitate to reach out.
Absolutely. If you'd like to find us on social media, you can find us on Instagram and Twitter at Tea and Strumpets, T as in Tom, N as in Nancy, Strumpets, Facebook and Pinterest /Tea and Strumpets, and YouTube if you search our full show title.
And if you really want to be in the know, sign up for email notifications on our website. If you subscribe, you'll be the first to know what we're reading each month. Plus, you'll get all sorts of extras, including exclusive content from all of the authors who join us on the podcast. And next month, hint, hint, we actually have 2 author interviews that are going to be really exciting. So now's a great time to sign up for our email list.
And if you're already signed up for our email list, Zoe will have told you all about it already.
Yeah. So our website is romancepod.com, and there you can find episodes, more information about us, and other resources. So check it out.
Finally, please rate, review, and tell a friend. Reviews on Apple Podcasts, Facebook, or anywhere else you can review us really helps other listeners find the podcast. And word of mouth is also one of the best ways that podcasts get found. So if you like what you're hearing, we'd love it if you spread the word.
Hey everybody, it's Kelly, host of Boobies and Newbies, part of the Frolic Podcast Network. Every episode, I invite a romance reading newbie to read and review their very first romance novel, alongside me, a self-proclaimed romance novel addict. We're talking everything from bisexual pegging. We need more pegging on TV. We need it in books. We need it in real life. We need to talk about it. To the deepest intricacies of relationships. It really is like we're fighting for us.
Yes.
Like let's
That's
fight.
beautiful.
We cover it all. Find and follow us on social media at Boobies Podcast and catch up on previous episodes on your favorite podcast streaming platform.
Let's talk about this book. I have kids screaming right outside my window, so if we get a lot of that, sorry, everybody. Okay.
I see your notes, Zoe. Okay.
I know, okay.
Guys, I'm going to preface this because Zoe was like, Kelsey, I have something to admit to you. I didn't really enjoy this book. And I was like, girl, I was reading this book thinking to myself, God, Zoe's going to hate this book. Which made me feel so bad because I love this author and I've read a lot of her books. And I was so bummed because I couldn't remember a great one because it's been a while since I've read her. So I was just looking for a beginning of one of her series and I saw it was one I hadn't read in a while. So I was like, Zoe, let's start with this one of hers. I haven't read it in a while. Let's give it a whirl. Man, we should have started with book 2 because I reread book 2 and it was fabulous.
Oh,
and
well,
so you would have liked that one so much better.
Yeah, because I did not like this one. I mean, I wrote the synopsis for this one, and if anyone, if you're listening to this, you probably listened to the synopsis, which means that you got the flavor of how I was feeling. The word hate is strong, but I think I have to use it. I hated this book. And I could tell that the author was a fine author. There were moments of witty banter or dialogue or things, but that were interesting. And I think she was like a perfectly fine author, and I would give her a chance in other books. I even heard from one of our Instagram followers that book 2 is like their favorite book of all time. So I'm bummed also that we didn't read that one. But this book had a lot of problems. I found it to be extremely problematic. And there were just like lots of things that I didn't like about it. I mean, obviously, like I kept waiting, and I even said that's in the synopsis. I kept waiting for the ball to drop because these 2 people, I have never met 2 characters that were so vicious to each other in the beginning.
I even reading it had that same reaction of I couldn't figure out why the hatred was so much, right? Because the first sentence you get is like Oliver's visceral hatred of Diane,
of her,
and how vile and terrible and devious she is. And then later on, you're like, oh, you guys had a 2-week affair. and Oliver, you just got freaked out by feelings, and Diane was mad because you left her, and she probably had feelings too, and you just ghosted her, which, to be fair, ghosting someone is shitty, but it sucks, but it doesn't mean you just hate the ground they walk upon.
Yeah, and it doesn't mean they become your mortal enemy forever and ever and ever. It just wasn't strong enough. I kept waiting for the ball to drop. I kept waiting for her to have a secret baby or have had like a really traumatic miscarriage and felt like she had no one to turn to. But she hated men because her family had basically sold her into the countessdom, right? But like she was excited about it. I remember that as part of her character. She was like excited to be a countess, but then it turned out that Frederick was like kind of just an absent husband and then gambled everything away. But he wasn't mean to her. He wasn't vicious. He just like lost all their money.
He lost all their money. I will say, yeah, he lost all their money and then left her penniless in a foreign country. That was rather shitty.
Which, yeah.
Because he died, but still, like.
Yeah. And like, I think it was great that she totally forged his thing and took what was owed to her.
For sure.
That was like, hell yeah.
And she still paid family debts. She was responsible with it.
She did. No, I actually think that the author set about to write a feminist book, but then it just didn't turn out that way, because I think she wanted Diane to come off as really strong in her convictions and someone who was looking for a partner in life, not someone to dictate her life for her. I get that. I get that that's what we were trying to do. And I'm going to talk a lot more about feminism later, because there were some things that we need to discuss. But it's just like, it was just weird because Diane was so mistrusting of everyone.
Yes.
Like everyone. It wasn't just that she mistrusted men, but somehow through her decent marriage to a man who lost all their money, and then from her building herself back up and having 1-2 week affair in her life, she hated everybody. And not just men, also didn't care for women, because she has this line, and I'll talk more about it later too, where she's like, I don't care. Like Oliver asks her about the other wives, like she, you know, as being part of the house, he's like, well, what about these men who have wives, like, and you're ruining them? And she's like, I don't care. Like every person for themselves. Like, you know what I mean? Like she's very much like, I am out to help myself and I deserve that. And I mean, that's a fine thing to think.
I will say, especially coming off, like reading her, you know, I was thinking of the fact that she was a very dislikable heroine. And we recently talked about having a dislikable heroine. But I think where it fell short, which like our other dislikable heroine we were talking about recently, was written as dislikable.
Unlikable? You keep saying dislikable.
Yeah, sorry. She was written as unlikable. You had a hard time liking her. But you could get there because of, like, she was very staunch in her beliefs, versus Diane was accidentally that way. Like,
and she flip-flopped.
Because she wasn't, and that was the hardest thing for me, like, the whole mistrusting of everyone. Like, even after Oliver has time and time again proven that he's not going to give her shit advice, and he's not trying to take it away from her. He's literally just like, can I help you make it better? And she's like, fuck you just want to destroy everything. Like, I hate you. Like, you're just out here to ruin me or try to take it away from me. And he's like, I'm not, though. Have I done it yet? Like,
seriously, actually, I'm really glad you brought that up, because I feel like actually also after hearing us do the synopsis, I feel like Oliver comes off worse because a lot of the sexual stuff kind of comes off really skeezy with Oliver. But I was like prepared to hate Oliver, but then I hated her just as much as I hated him, because Oliver has like, he kind of comes around, and he's definitely misguided on the sex stuff. But at the same time, he has a lot of actions in the book where he just tries to be like, exactly like you said, just like a normal human being. And she just blows it out of proportion in like ways that you don't see coming. Yeah. Like, I mean, the shooting him, that one was fine. I was like, fine that she shot him. It was kind of amusing. Yeah. It's a book. But like later on, she just would get like so angry at him for no reason and just like throw up all these crazy defenses. But it was just like, where is this coming from? Because you have not had such a traumatic life. No. You've had one and a half hard things happen to you, and you've done really well for yourself afterwards. So like, where is this animosity coming from? I didn't get it. But I think we have to discuss her plan for this club. Because, like, she is also, like we said, so adamant that no one is going to get in there. No one is going to tell her what to do. No one is going to tell her anything. But as the book goes on, we realize that Diane has no fucking clue what happens at a club. She's never been inside one. She really has only hearsay. She doesn't have like advisors that, you know, maybe there was like a friendly grandfather character that like had told her about, you know, and she had used him. No, there was nothing like that. And so Oliver is like, she has to ask him what games they should have at the club. And if they should have anything other than card games, because she doesn't know that anything else other than card games exists. Are you kidding me?
Yeah.
You spent 2 years planning and you didn't have that part figured out? That seems really important.
No, yeah, there was, well, and things too, because, you know, she's like, oh yeah, and my club is going to be all of these staffed by women. And it was one of the girls who was like, so like, we're going to have like, or yeah, one of the girls is like, there's going to be what, like a couple big footmen around, right? Just in case the guys get too handsy and grabby, you know? Yeah. And she's like, that might be a good idea. It's like, yeah, because you're like, no touching. That's like one of your main rules is like all the guys are going to know no touching. It's going to be fine. It's like, yes, but you need a little muscle to back up that thing. That like,
there's just so many things that she has not thought of that are fundamental, right? So I just like, I didn't even list them because like I would have never gotten through the synopsis. So, okay. So I feel like there was just a lot of holes in her club thing. And I know that she originally had a different benefactor who had a property that she could use, but I don't feel like any of those questions would have been answered just by a different benefactor and a different property.
Yeah.
So next, I want to talk about, this is Zoe's list of things that annoyed her.
Yeah, there we go.
So next, I want to talk about what a stupid night Oliver chose for their 24 hours. He chose the night of opening the club, 4 a.m., and then she wouldn't be able to go back the second night. Like, what?
I know. Well, and it's funny because I felt like towards the end of the book, I was actually more forgiving towards Oliver because, like, he made rash decisions, but then he realized it amongst himself. Like, he was like, it's like he demanded his opening night, and he's like, that was probably a poor choice, but I've already said it, so I can't go back now. You know, he has a little bit more of that internal dialogue of, you know, trying to reform. I will say I think we got more internal dialogue from Oliver through the entire book.
I agree.
And so I felt that, like, the growth path was definitely more in Oliver's favor versus Diane, like, came around of it in the last, like, not even last quarter of the book.
Not even last quarter. It was like last pages when she's like, I'll take a partner. And then like the last line is her saying, I love you. It's just, it's like, it's very abrupt. There's not much development from Diane because she has so many backslides that are not just like one step back. They're like back to page 1. And you're like, why are you just screaming at this man? I don't understand.
Yeah.
So anyhow, so that like kind of irritated me. And then I just, like the one that like really, really got me is like the absolute, pardon my language here, but like the motherfucking idiocy of getting on the balloon. The balloon man told them that they were just setting up and checking to make sure that there were no holes. And Diane was like, what? And then he was like, no, I am a Marquess. Here is my money. Who will take me up? He literally says 20 pounds to whoever will take us up. Like, are you kidding me? I mean, it was just like,
I know.
Why was that even there? It didn't need
further
to be there.
Yeah. I don't know. I think it was, to look at it forgiving, I think it was more showing like the side of Oliver that was like kind of like in the moment and like fun and like just having fun with her, and it's just like, I need to do something interesting to keep her here with me, otherwise she's just gonna hate me, right? And I'm not saying it was a great plan, and it definitely didn't do anything to further the plotline, because it's not like they got off the balloon and had like a realization moment. They're like, this isn't so bad.
Yeah, and it's just like that was kind of an interesting thing. The whole date was an interesting thing to me because, and I'm going to, go to a quote here. It's just taking me a minute to load it. Okay, well, I don't know where the quote is, but so basically at some point she has there's this quote where she's just like, oh, somewhere between, balloon rides and lemon ices, she realized that there was more to Oliver than she'd ever thought before. And I just was like, so one date made you realize that with the 2-week affair where you spent most of your time in bed, you didn't know this guy? Whoa, what a surprise. I was just like, it irritated me. And there were just a lot of anti-feminist statements from Diane, and also a lot of her actions. And I'm going to talk that later in our feminist recap that I just really didn't like. But then literally, she will flip-flop on them, which we kind of mentioned before. So that was irritating to me. And then the last thing I'm going to talk about from my list is that the author used the word chit to describe women, which the men did. It was like man speak. And I get that, men are kind of doing their banter, and I get that they're rakes and they're all this stuff. But I've done this before, in books that I dislike. I went ahead and just, Control F in my e-reader to see how many times the word shit was used. And it was 82 times, which is too many times.
Yes. I will.
It's way too many times.
I did think it was highly overused. And then I also, since I read the next book in the series as well, it was overused in that one as well. It seems to be her favorite, blasé male description of a woman, which is.
It just rubs me the wrong way. Yeah. I don't care that the men call the girls chits here and there. I get it as a character choice. I just don't need to hear it that many times for it to have its effect.
Yes, agreed.
Yeah. So anyhow, those were my general thoughts. There was also a character named Genevieve who would be also referred to as Jenny, but Genevieve was spelled with a G and Jenny was spelled with a J. And that was confusing for me for the first 75 pages because I was like, is that the same person or are those two different people? So anyhow, again, just some little things that really made the reading experience difficult for me.
Also, I needed way more information on Genevieve, and I really wanted her to have a story and a book, and she doesn't, which is so sad. She
doesn't? What? I mean, she was the most interesting character in the whole book. I
know.
What? And I don't even have her in here because if I did, I would basically write a whole story about her, right?
She's great. But I was looking through the books in the series because I was seeing which ones I have and which ones I don't. It turns out I have most of them. And she wasn't in when, what happens is, after this, the series kind of goes to the girls who work at the club. And so it's,
which also were interesting.
Yeah, and they get way more interesting. And, I'm very interested to see what happens. It's, apparently, the third book in this series is actually, a full-length Christmas book.
Ooh, good to know.
Just so you know.
Nice.
But yeah, there was a lot of confusing here or there's. And to be fair, the whole Lord Cameron plotline is so interesting because Diane writes him off so much at the beginning. And then suddenly he becomes the main villain, and he's actually pretty devious about it too. And he actually becomes because at first when I realized he was being the villain, I was like, oh no, it's the guys he's surrounding himself around. He's just a fall guy. He's not the guy who's even coming up with the ideas. It's someone has talked him into it. But no, he's actually just a greedy asshole who's looks at all the splendor and he's like, well, this bitch shouldn't live well. I'm the Lord. I should live well. And so I can just take this from her with no effort on my part and it'll just pool money into me. Which wasn't very smart on his part because, clubs have overhead, but.
Well, he was extremely dumb in the way that they trapped him. And I know that I literally summed up 100 pages in 2 bullet points because it was just, the plot was so convoluted and also you don't really, you as the reader know what's going on until the end when they trap him in a room and are you're 4,000 pounds in debt now to us, and like we can't pay you more because people will find out. And oh, by the way, Genevieve is Napoleon's niece, and she's trying to like,
the club is actually like a front for the like fun to like restore Napoleon to power, and like they'll have you killed, and because you're messing with their schemes, and because you're in it.
There were
like,
so many holes though.
Yeah, no, it was
so many.
It was very all over the place. But I mean, like I appreciated that level of theatricality.
The idea is interesting. The execution just didn't quite hit that.
Yeah. Well, I think we were too focused on the hate for each other for no reason.
There was a lot of that. Like, it just kept bogging us down.
Even reading it for me, like, and I love this author, and I went into it with much more of an open mind. Granted, it's been forever since I read it, but...
I mean, I went into it with an open mind.
I know you did. I wasn't saying you didn't get into an open mind. I just, like... I kept trying to find the good in it, and it felt like reading a misunderstandings plot to me. It was that level of frustration. Like, I couldn't even really care about the sidelines of it because I just felt like I was reading a misunderstandings plot, which is just, you guys know I hate.
Yeah, this one I had to put down a few times. Like it took me over a week to finish this book, to get myself to just keep reading it, because it went so slow for me, because it just was like it felt like a slog. So anyhow, let's continue on because there's going to be more to talk about. So hero and heroine opinions and ratings. Hero and heroine ratings.
Okay.
So what would you rate our hero? Or do you want me to go first?
I think you should go first on both of these because...
That's fair.
Yeah, your level is just way higher than mine, and I'll just chirp in here and there. How about that?
All right. It's fair. I'm going to give Oliver a 4.
Okay.
I think that if a 5 is take it or leave it, I want to leave. I almost want to give him a 5 because like he has a curve. Like he learns, he gets a little better, but the sex stuff, the consent stuff, the things, the orgasm shaming, like that doesn't work for me. And honestly, like he should be like a -10, but there's just something about, as you read him, you start to feel bad for him because Diane is so mean to him, and like mean to him after a point where she has obviously also been nice to him and has decided to like have sex with him again on her own terms, like it just, he gets a 4 from me.
Okay, fair. I'm gonna give him a 5, but fair. Yeah, because that's where I'm at with him. Like, I really did like him. I liked how he did kind of switch. And, like, the second half of the book, he was really trying to genuinely be helpful, genuinely trying to prove himself to her. Like,
yeah, he was nothing but genuine at the second half of the book, I would say. I still, like, did not like some of his sex stuff, but I think that came, again, before that part of the book.
Yeah.
And that's what we want to see from the characters, that they change, that they grow.
And that's, and, yes, I don't know. I didn't read the same level of, like, non-consent, like, in that scene you're talking about, because Diane, like, yes, she was, like, she had made an agreement. She was, like, forced there. Like, that's the negative for me. But, like, Diane, even in her inner thoughts, like,
no, but her inner thoughts were, is he going to drown me in this tub? Should I drink so that I don't remember any of this?
But this is like that. But that's what I didn't. But this was where I didn't understand her, because like I already knew she'd had a relationship, but this is also where I didn't understand the hatred, because she's like, this man's going to try to drown me, and I'm like, I think you're being a little over dramatic, lady. Like, and I didn't like, and for me, I just didn't. I guess the reason why it didn't feel so negative, like I didn't have the same negative reaction to me, because like I thought Diane was literally psyching herself out. Like she was purposely putting a negative spin on it because she didn't want to like it.
Yeah.
Because she didn't want to like Oliver, which she'd already been fighting. She's like, once she realized he wasn't trying to like take her club, she was just like, so now he just needs to try to kill me because he's not taking my club.
But to me, even if she's trying to talk herself out of it and she is outwardly expressing that she doesn't like it, but maybe inside a little tiny part of her does want it, that's not consent.
No, I'm not saying I'm not calling it consent. I'm saying I don't think her motives were clear in the book. I don't think that I think that it was the same flip-floppy thing. I don't think that she actually was like, I didn't see it as a consent in the sense of like, well, you think he's going to kill you, so but
But like literally in that same scene, he says things to her like, say you want me. And she says like, you have my body, you don't have my mind.
No, I get what you're saying. I don't know. I read it differently because, but also too, I think that for me, it was all like a friend. Diane never would have, like, even if she had wanted it, even if the inner thoughts we got in the whole thing were, oh my God, he's making, like, oh, this is so good. This is so good. This is so good. But outwardly she said that, like, it would be a different spin. I think that part of the reason is because she was just like, he's awful. Like, she just kept telling herself he was awful.
And that's the thing is the inner dialogue also matched there was no moments of inner dialogue for me, for Diane, where we as the reader could really feel like she wanted it. That's where it just didn't work for me. But we should move on to our heroine, to Diane. And I'm gonna give her a 2. I think she was a really poor heroine. I think she was underdeveloped. I think we didn't get enough of information for her. I think she was wishy-washy, flip-floppy. I think she was super anti-feminist. I did not enjoy reading her. I was more disgusted with her than I was with him because she just was all over the place and vicious. And I feel bad, but maybe I should have been harder. Maybe this is that moment of like looking at a woman versus looking at a man and like allowing him something, you know what I mean? Like we kind of talked about with the Rakes, but I'm trying to really look inward to myself right now. And to me, Oliver was a much better character. He had development. He had a trajectory of like a clear path of like growth. And Diane had none of that. And I didn't like any of her character traits. Oliver at least had some likable traits because he was like, you know, he was sociable and personable and he tried to do nice things. And Diane just was like, I don't want to help people. This is all about me, you know, and, you know, I don't know. It just, now I feel bad. Maybe I should have been harsher on him. No, I'm going to have to think about this. But to me, Diane was a 2.
I think I will give her that 2 with you. Okay. Because the reality is, Zoe, like I would not be as forgiving if she was a man. If she was a man in the situation, like if the roles were reversed.
If she was a man, okay, you're right.
If she was a man, you would equally hate her because like there's just no.
This isn't a character I enjoy reading.
No, it's not a character you enjoy reading. Because you're looking at someone who is taking anything negative and turning it out tenfold. And I'm not saying, and it's not that she's, and that's the thing is she's not a mean person. Like you see how she interacts with the girls of the club. And like, yes, she's kind of she's like, I'm not here I'm not creating a home for wayward, like ladies, you know, that's not what this is. This is a business. But at the same time too, she's like, oh, I can do some good. Like I can prevent them from ending up on the streets because they were like I was 2 years ago when my husband had died, you know, in that sense, like ladies who had very few options. Oh,
don't worry. I've got those pages bookmarked for my feminist discussion.
But the thing is like, so she has those moments. So you find, and in those moments you're like, okay, so you're not a mean person.
Yeah.
But you only want to reflect negativity. Like, but it's the same thing because when she first was dealing with, you know, like, because I think the whole, like, the idea of, for me, I feel like Lord Cameron became this, like, bigger problem, partly was because she blew him off. And she was just like, screw you, like, you're nothing. I've never thought, like, you seem better than Frederick. I think you're nothing. Like, you should just be happy with the title, you know?
Yeah. But she's kind of mean
to
him.
But she is. She was very mean to him.
Yeah. And just like, that's the thing is like, I don't I didn't like her behavior, and I didn't like reading her, and we should keep going because there's so much more to discuss, and I'm gonna berate her more as we talk about our feminist discussion.
Okay, great.
But let's have a moment of lightness because I want to talk about our favorite quotes, and I actually had 3 from this book that I thought were kind of fun and nice. So, I want to share those. Can I go first?
Yes, you can.
All right. So the first one is Oliver says to Diane, "Determination does not make a business successful, my dear." And she replies, "Men who flee my bed so swiftly they leave their waistcoats behind aren't permitted to call me my dear." And I thought that was very clever. I also really have a thing about characters being called my dear too early in a book. And like, you know what I mean? And so I really appreciated that sassy reply. So the next one that I liked, that was like such a great feminist line. And I just like, I was like mad it was in this book because it's like such a great line. Genevieve says to Diane, "That man is a terror." And she replies, "No, he's formidable, but so am I." Like,
that's a great line. I know. Like, that was a great line. That's such a great line.
Such a great line.
So, one thing we didn't talk about, which I think why you and I both love Jenny, because she was even confused by Diane's forceful dislike. And then she's like, "Oh my God, Diane, I'm here to save you." And Diane's like, "No, I kind of like him." She's like, I don't understand. Jenny's like, "But I hate him because you hate him." He's like, maybe I don't hate him.
Genevieve is like such a staunch ally for Diane, and like we never learn why. It's another like hole of the book because we never learn why. It's like, do you owe Diane a life debt? Like what is, and there's like this like, you know, mysterious circumstances to how they met, and she like won't tell Oliver how they really know each other.
She doesn't ever tell us either, like, or anyone. I'm so confused. No. Anyway, but this is a great Genevieve line, in fact, because they're going to the ball, and Genevieve is Diane's companion, and Oliver, you know, makes a remark like, "Oh, you're here to protect Diane," and Genevieve replies, "I'm here to protect you, my lord," she returned, her soft voice touched by a half-dozen accents, but settling on none of them. "If Diane were to murder you, it would upset our schedule." Like, so good. And also her soft voice touched by a half-dozen accents, but settling on none of them. That is a great sentence. I love Jenny's descriptions were so good. Like,
yeah. So I'm very sad that she doesn't have a book because I wanted to learn more about her enough that like she was so interesting in this book that I was like ready to pick up her book. So bummer. Anyhow, do you have a quote you want to share?
Yes. Okay. So this is another character we didn't talk about in the synopsis, but who I think is a wonderful character, which is Oliver's best friend, Jonathan. Because that man is fantastic. And I was very upset that he wasn't the hero of the next book.
Oh no, is he a hero in one of the books? Oh my God, no! Maybe that's the lost book. It's Jenny.
I know, right? Anyway, like pretty much all Jonathan's reactions, like interactions with Oliver, are great. But I'm gonna read you just one of them towards the beginning, and then I have a second one, which I think is when we see Oliver's arc start to change, which I think is important. For a long moment, Oliver glared at the Viscount. "Remind me why we're friends," he suggested finally. "Because no one else tells you the truth about yourself," Jonathan said easily, "and because I don't pay attention to what other people say about you."
Aww.
And then an even better one, which was Oliver says to Jonathan, there's one of the girls who comes to work at the club. "What are you stammering about? Who's Camille Price?" "You haven't heard?" Jonathan returned, raising both eyebrows. "I know something you don't. Hold a moment. I need to jot this down for my memoirs."
So great.
And then
see, I was just going to say, like there was like, that's why even though I like really didn't like this book and I didn't like a lot of the choices the author made, I still don't like, I don't think she's a bad writer at all, even though I disagree with a lot of her choices.
Yes. So actually, you know, it's really funny. we're talking about wishy-washy, and I just saw something I highlighted, and I actually wrote a note towards, and I literally wrote, I have mixed feelings towards her, in reference to Diane. Anyway, so this is Oliver's like upward arc in a sense, and or down the other side, whatever you want to say. So he's talking to Jonathan, August, and he's admitting that he had an affair with Diane in Vienna. And he says, I caught her once in Vienna, and I let her get away. I'm attempting to be more cautious this time. I want to be certain what I want, because I won't get a third chance. Which is like, that was it. Like he
realized he grew.
Yes, he grew as a character. It was great.
Yeah. And I also appreciated in that moment that he wasn't just like, I've decided I want to marry this woman, because she was being a really terrible person to him. Mm-hmm. So it's reasonable for him to say, I want to think about it and make sure this is what I want.
Exactly.
And go about this the right way. Although the way he went about it is still debatable. But let's not digress too far, because we should talk about our steaminess rating and the encounter counter. So there were 3 encounters. I found this personally extremely difficult to stomach. I thought that first encounter was extremely skeezy. I was like, it was like drinking like a cup of seaweed when you're expecting tea. I just like, it was slimy and not the right texture and cold and salty. And to me, it just flavored every encounter thereafter. I remember, I think the desk encounter, I remember thinking like, oh, here are 2 people who want to have sex with each other and have like a quick, passionate moment.
Yes.
But I just like I couldn't get into it because I felt like there was no development. There was no development of them wanting each other. There was no lust, except, Oliver had lust, but one-sided does not make the lust.
Yeah. And I definitely think we needed to hear, because it was like almost like you would get snippets of Diane like being attracted to him, but it was like she shut it down even to you. Does that make sense? It was like the second she even started to like think that she was attracted to Oliver again, it's like she shut it down so fast that you never got a sense of that attraction. Because like
she inner thoughts, outward words. Diane really does not. The warmest that she gets to Oliver is small sentences like what we had in our quotes, which was kind of where she had the thing about the like, oh, he's actually maybe a human after all, between lemon ices and ballooning, like things like that. It didn't get much warmer than that from her.
No, you're right. And I think that's where you really saw the stark difference, though, is because Oliver's arc really changed, but it changed drastically. And then she kind of like took a step away from hatred.
And to Jenny, her closest confidant, she never admitted she was starting to really like him. She just kind of was like, well, maybe he's not so bad. And like, I'm doing this for the business.
Yeah.
It wasn't even this moment of maybe I was wrong. I think she like very near the end started to say maybe I was wrong, because then Jenny said at one point, she was like, well, I only hated him because you hated him. So if you don't hate him anymore, then I can stop hating him, Like, I don't know.
Yeah. No, I think there was too much time focusing on why she didn't like him, just in like her context, that it did color everything, because, even in the, like you said, even in the scene where like it was the death scene and it was nice and she was coming around to him and yet she still came away with it ready to strike at him for anything. Like even when it was, full consent on both sides. But it's really funny that you said it was like drinking tea, but getting seaweed. Because in my head, when I was thinking about it as we were reading this, and I was like, what's my rating going to be? What's my steaminess rating going to be? And I was like, it's like you were expecting like your favorite tea and getting your least favorite tea. Like there was like
definitely not what
for
you
me.
expected.
There was still tea there, but it was not what I was expecting, and it's not what I wanted.
Yes. Definitely not what I wanted either. So now we get to this part that is really eating at my heart. This is our feminist recap. And I feel and you can disagree with me, but I feel very strongly that this book is an offender for many reasons. I think that the sexual consent stuff is not what I want, young girls to be reading or older girls to be reading nowadays. I don't think that those scenes are sexy. I think that there are even older novels that have like some rapey things that I find to be more like somehow land more. I don't know. Then this just did not land well with me. So anyhow, but it's more than that. It's her attitude towards other women, which I think is also not very feminist at all. I think that, as I said at the beginning, I think the writer wanted this to be feminist by going with the I want a partner thing, but Diane does not come off that way. So I'm going to read a whole bunch of quotes that I have here to try to back up my point here. So there's also some language that was used throughout the book that I did want to note. The chit thing, I don't think that the repetition of that comes off well to make the book feel feminist to me. I think it's overusing a device, and it just brings it down rather than lifts it up. They also refer to Genevieve as the French twist, and I find that really derogatory. I don't know why, but they do that a lot, and I really didn't like it. It just, to me, felt, again, because of the repetition of it just felt like too much rather than a device used for a purpose. Felt like a crutch rather than a device. Okay. So again, we're talking language in this first quote because she says something about Diane gestured at him. Pray continue. I know I won't be able to get any use out of you until your girlish curiosity is satisfied. So here she is trying to, bring him down by calling him a girl. I don't like that. And I know that this is an old book, but we're reading it in today's times, and I think we can do better. So it continues saying, the insult was rather blatant. To him, that signaled that she wasn't comfortable with the path of the conversation. Good. My girlish curiosity wants to know whether you've considered that you're planning on doing to other women what was done to you. So Oliver, here he is bringing this thing to her, right? We talked about this earlier. And this is her reply. Oh, good heavens, she exclaimed, putting both hands on her mouth. You're absolutely correct. How could I have been so blind? Her horrified expression lifted with a faint smile. I will no longer be trod upon, Oliver. I choose a wagering club because I appreciate irony and because it's a splendid way to make money. What is the old saying? The house always wins, I believe. And the other women? I'm not a tutor or a morality lesson. They are on their own, just as I was. And I'm just like, ugh, like that's because she doesn't really come around. She sort of comes around later, but let's talk about page 132. So we're talking 50 pages later, if my book will work with me. And I do not wish to be seen as a crusader for women's rights. That will drive men away more quickly than anything else. This is about me earning my way, not about me being thrown out of somewhere on my arse. Like, okay, got it. Thanks, Diane. And then we have her being shitty to women again and not realizing it because of her employees. So she has a pretty employee and she has an idea of what to do about her. So she says, quote, I've also been thinking of moving Sophia White from the faro tables to seating the dining room. Gentlemen seem to like her eyes. And her hair and the rest of her, Jenny chuckled. She's quite charming, which is what I require. It continues. Her companion carefully spooned marmalade onto her toasted bread. You aren't concerned that her parentage might make some tongues wag? I'm hoping it does. And how does Miss White feel about you using her as a curiosity? Diane frowned. Clearly you don't approve. You might have simply said so. It's not that, mein Freund. It's that you didn't ask her. She may have been born on the wrong side of the blanket, but we all have our degrees of pride. Fine, I'll ask her. Merci. Are there any other employees whose permission I need to ask for anything? Like, what?
Yeah.
Like, just, I don't like that. But it's, again, the feminism thing is not all Diane. It's a lot of the sex stuff, which I've already talked about. I don't think I need to go through that again. But later, there's also a moment of physical intimidation where Oliver like actually tries to physically intimidate her with his size, and does in the writing. And it's just like, it's not a comfortable moment. It says, quote, "He took her shoulder and backed her into the wall. Damnation, she hated when he did that. It simply demonstrated that while she could be his equal intellectually, physically, he was 7 stone of solid muscle heavier and 6 inches taller, and he used that muscle to his advantage."
I really didn't like those scenes either. Like, he was like, it's like, and the description too, it's like he literally like put his forearm over her chest and shoved her into a wall. And I'm like, that's very aggressive. And not in a good way.
Yeah, and I think it's supposed to read as sexy. And like there is something sexy about, a little bit of aggression. But I feel like all of that has to be wanted by both parties, or there has to be a safe, a safe word, a safe space. And it didn't feel like that at all. So I didn't like that. And then I have the quote of the flip-flopping, right? We talked about how earlier she's like, I don't give a shit about other women. Oliver says that to her. Mm-hmm. And then all of a sudden we're at page 150 now. And she says, "I refuse to be responsible for seeing another woman, another wife, left penniless because of her husband's idiocy." I'm sorry. What?
Well, it's just like you get the same thing in where like she sees all the girls and she's like, oh, like maybe I can offer, all those.
I feel like that's different though. You're totally right, because later she flip-flops, but she also is like, she talks about how she sees there being value in being helpful to these girls, and that she finds joy in that a little bit.
Yes, but
in this, she acts like to Oliver like, what the fuck? I'm not going to, ruin these women's lives, when literally 100 pages ago she said, I don't give a shit about these women. So sorry, I interrupted you though. Continue, because I don't disagree with what
That's
you're
okay.
saying.
My thing was, it's just like, I think Jenny was our feminist one, because Jenny was the one who she kind of tricked her in a sense to even like wanting to hire the girl. And this was, it's a girl, I can't remember her name in the book, but it's not her real name. Emily is what she calls herself in the book. It's not her real name anyway. And Diane, like, Jenny's like, basically kind of like weasels Diane into doing the interview. And then Diane's like, oh, who's this girl? Like, oh, maybe I can help her and be a safe space for her, and like help these women out. And she's like, Jenny, we should hire more people like this. And Jenny's like, great, I already have the list like ready to go. And that's how you get the Sophia White and the Camille Price, which we mentioned in like other quotes. But then later on, you see like the treatment of Sophia White in the sense that like, she's like, well, why can't I just use these women like as I please, like, and put them in uncomfortable situations because it makes my life easier. Or like, I'm not a home for wayward girls. Like, I'm not a saint. Like, don't put that on me. It's like, what are you doing?
Yeah.
Because I really thought like,
it's not,
because she did flip flop. And it was so funny because like when she first was like, I thought the whole arc of, finding the noble girls, like I thought that for me was going to be Diane's turning point, like in my opinion, because it's like, well, maybe she's shitty to Oliver, but at least she's like creating this haven for women where they can actually be employed, and it's benefiting both of them because Sophia makes money off the club, but like the girls get a safe space. But then she's just like, no, I'm not doing that. Like, and I'm like, but you said you were doing that. And now you're like annoyed at yourself for doing that. And I don't get it.
Yep. Yeah. And there just wasn't a lot of like warmth in this book at all. And I come to romance looking for warmth and inspiration. And I come to romance to feel good at the end of the book. And I didn't feel good at the end of this book. So I don't know. Do you agree with my offender? Have I convinced you?
Like I wasn't going to call it a supporter. And I definitely think that neutral was a bit generous. So like, yeah, I'll go with you on the offender. I think that
we have our first agreed upon offender.
Yes. And it's just like it's hard because like it can be like it can be so much more. I just think that it didn't quite get to where it needed to be. Because even when you...
I think you're being nice to it. I personally think this book couldn't be anymore. I think this author can do much better, though.
Oh, she definitely... I mean, the next book is a complete... Like, the next book... It's just actually funny, because in the next book, Diane, like, you see a little bit different of her. She's not different. Like, but you see just a little bit of her. But it's even funny because at one point she says something, and I think even in the book, the girl was like, well, that wasn't really that helpful, but that's okay.
Yeah. And I mean, like, I understand, you know, especially after talking to Scarlett and talking about writing unlikable characters and, you know, and defending them, because not everybody is happy-go-lucky sunshine and daisies, you know, and we are, you know, human beings are really dimensional and we have faults. And like, I don't think that was achieved here. So I think we're ready for our final book rating.
All right.
I've been debating what to rate this book because, to be perfectly honest, I already said I hated this book. I have obviously like put in a lot of thoughts and a lot of feelings. My last thing that I will add is I would have not finished this book had we not had to read it for the podcast. And I found it to be not to my liking at all. And so I am going to give this book a 1.
Wow.
It's a book. It has words. It is a book that I would not recommend to anybody because I don't think that it's fun to read and I don't think it's positive. And I did not enjoy reading it. So that's why it gets a 1 from me.
Fair. I mean, I'm going to give it a 3. So, I mean, I'm going to go a little better. But it's funny because...
That's less than I thought you were going to give it, to be honest, which is fair because, like, we're different people.
Yeah.
But
no, well, it's funny because... So I was reminded that, like, we did read this book for book club at one point.
Oh,
I
really?
think, which maybe is how I turned on to this author. And then, you know, like, read the second book, enjoyed the second book. So then... you know, read more of her. However, I didn't remember the plot of this book. Like, it was a reread for me, but I read it so long ago that I don't remember it. And so it, like, my friend, Sarah, does, like, her own plot synopses for, like, as a present one year, she basically cataloged all the books we had read for book club and did, like, a funny synopsis of each one. And next time I pick a book I haven't read in a while, I should consult the book with all the back things read in book club so I can actually see what Sarah wrote about it and then make a recommendation off that.
Have you reread her synopsis for this one?
She reread part of it to me, and it was hilarious.
Oh my gosh. Well, maybe you should bring that to our next episode and we can share it in the beginning because that would be really fun if she'd be willing to share it.
Yes.
Or maybe we don't need to drag it any further because this just wasn't a book for
us.
us.
I was thinking maybe next time I have a book that it's been a while since I read it, if I do have a description of it, I should definitely bring that out.
Include it at the end.
All right, Zoe. So moving on, we're going to shake this one off. We're going to shake it off, it off. And... talk about what we're reading next time.
Well, next week, Kelsey and I are actually taking a break. We're taking a week off.
Yay.
I know, terrible of us. But it's because we are preparing really a lot for our really exciting month of June. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about June in a second. So next week, we are going to be giving you a second chance at loving our episode on Courtney Milan's fabulously perfect novella, The Governess Affair. So we're going to be replaying that one next week. But after that, get excited for a really awesome packed June because we are celebrating Pride Month here on Tea and Strumpets.
Woo-hoo.
And we have 2 fabulous authors joining us. We're going to have 2 interviews. Yay. And they are LGBTQ authors in the historical space. So you guys can all start guessing who those authors are. And we're also going to be reading 2 fabulous inclusive books as well. So it's going to be a great month.
Yay! I'm excited for this month.
I am too. I'm really excited for the books that we're reading too. So it's just going to be great. And if you want to learn more about those books and those authors, you should subscribe to our email list because you will have a chance to look at the past, the latest email update when you subscribe. So if we've already sent out things, you'll get a chance to look at that. But yeah, you definitely want to do that before June so you'll get the what we're reading in June email. And that is on our website, romancepod.com.
Awesome.
So join us next week for a replay of Courtney Milan's A Governess Affair.
And may all your ever afters end happily.
Tea and Strumpets is part of the Frolic Podcast Network. Find more podcasts you'll love at frolic.media/podcasts.
We also learned that after their affair, Oliver ran back to London, to Diane's eyes, like a scared dog. It was scalded dog.
Was it?
Yes. Scalded is the word. I would make edits on this, but for some reason it's telling me I'm offline. So, which is untrue because I'm talking to you, but I don't know. So I'm not going to be able to like make edits on the fly, just so you know.
Totally fine. I'll just hit them. Then it's like nice for the blog to be able to be like just dunk.
Yes.
But perfect.
Okay.
So take that one again.
We also learned that after the
Sorry.
You're right. No, it's fine. Tensions did not seem that high, and to be fair, this seems like a really extra level of heatedness between them that just seems unwarranted for a while. And continues to be. Anyway, so Oliver decides to acquiesce and strategize for the next battle.
Acquiesce.
So Oliver decides to acquiesce. A few weeks later, they have encounter number 3, which...
Not you. Sorry, my dog.
A few weeks later, I
sorry.
I was like, okay, sorry.
No, my bad. Okay, I'm going to let this dog out because now just please stop making barks. Dog. About, a little bit of aggression, but I feel like all of that has to be... What is going on out there? My dog was sitting outside the door and her tail is banging the door. Yes. So, but I feel like that it has to be...